Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Joelle Kuzam. I'm a partner with the firm of Bricker Graydon, and I practice in our public sector group and employment group. I'm also very proud to serve as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. In addition to Bricker Graydon's sponsorship, we are very grateful to the sponsors from the Columbus region, the Ohio Mayor's Alliance, and Spectrum. We're also very grateful to the presenting sponsor for our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And thank you to the Ellis for hosting us today. Every CMC forum takes a village. Let's thank everyone who supported today's program. More than 1.5 million Ohioans, over 13% of our state's population, live in the cities governed by today's three panelists. Today, we welcome the current mayors of Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland as these three leaders discuss the challenges and opportunities facing our 21st century cities. We will hear their strategies for economic growth, urban development, transit, community engagement, and more. Bricker Graydon's 70-plus public sector lawyers are so proud to sponsor this wonderful panel today and to be able to help communities make their project dreams come to life. And now, without further ado, please help me welcome today's distinguished panelists, the Honorable Justin Bibb, Mayor of the City of Cleveland, the Honorable Andrew Ginther, Mayor of the City of Columbus, and the Honorable Aftab Purval, Mayor of the City of Cincinnati, and our wonderful friend and moderator for today's program, Yolanda Harris, news anchor with WBNS TV 10 TV. Yolanda, welcome back to CMC. We look forward to today's conversation, and the podium is yours.
And thank you very much. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Mayor Ginther, you are the OG of mayors on this panel today, so the pressure is on for you.
Is that what?
I was specifically listed as the eye candy for today.
Well, eye candy, yes.
know.
By OG, I mean you've been a mayor longest. There you go. You've been a mayor longest.
You think this gray hair is from my tenure in service, but it's actually my daughter turned 14 years old yesterday. That's where this gray hair comes from.
Yeah, that'll do it. Those teen
all
years.
All is good. All is good. I'm happy to be up here with some great, young, dynamic mayors of some of the great cities of our state.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get going. So let's start. All right, mayors, we're going to talk first about crime. What specific steps are you taking to address the rising crime rates in your cities, and how do you plan to ensure community trust in law enforcement?
Fellas, if you don't mind, if I could take this right off the bat. First of all, thank you all so much for having me. It is so exciting to be back in Columbus. I went to Ohio State, proud alum.
OH!
Yes, there we go, IO.
OH!
Let's go, IO, baby, go Bucks. Forgive me for my voice. I was in Minneapolis yesterday. This is nonpartisan, but I was in Minneapolis yesterday advocating for Vice President Harris's campaign, and I was yelling with joy. Sorry about the voice. And yeah, you know, the last thing I'll say is your eyes do not deceive you. The mayor of Cincinnati is in fact Asian. Very proud of that diversity in my community. Look, crime is, and I'm comfortable speaking with my brother mayors, crime is first, second, and third priority for me in Cincinnati, and I know that's true for Cleveland and Columbus. I do want to push back, Yolanda, with love. Crime is not rising in my city. In fact, all of the crime stats that we look at objectively show significant declines, particularly since the pandemic, and declines since Mayor Bibb and I took office in 2022. The strategies that we have been rolling out, starting with a stronger relationship with our federal partners at ATF, with the incredible Ohio's own Steve Dettelbach, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and our local law enforcement using crime gun intelligence centers where we have physical locations for that collaboration, using best-in-class innovation and science to not just track fingerprints, but also to track shell casings to connect more quickly and efficiently illegal guns to not just one, but several crimes, has led to incredible prosecutions for illegal guns and violent crimes in my community. There is no doubt that, particularly as it relates to property crimes, and particularly as it relates to youth violence, we still have challenges. But in Cincinnati, youth violence from last year, not pre-pandemic, since last year, youth violence is down by 50%. And so, please, let's clap it up, guys. And so we are doing everything that we can. Law enforcement, by the way, there's this untruth that Democrats want to defund police. That's not true. Democratic mayors and President Biden across the country using ARP funds historically funded police. And that is exactly right in order to have the resources and the man and women power on the streets, not just fighting violent crime, but also, more importantly, increasing that community. Look, the last thing I'll say, I'm sorry to give such a long monologue, but in addition to all of the traditional ways that we are fighting crime, it's also critically important to be innovative in the public safety space. And before I came to the mayor's office, I was the global brand attorney for Oil of P&G skincare company, which made me a beauty attorney, which is ridiculous. But anyway, but the single biggest difference between public sector and private sector is risk tolerance. And in the public sector, particularly around public safety, it is very hard to get people to buy into innovative thinking, because what is inherent in innovation is iterative failing quickly to understand why that happened, to build upon it and create a better product. I'm so proud that we have innovated in Cincinnati. For the last 20 years, we have had a co-response model. A lot of cities are talking about this. Mental health professionals and police officers for some 911 calls. For 20 years, we've been doing it. We went a step further last year, and now we are launching and have launched an alternative response to crisis model where for some 911 calls, we only send unarmed mental health professionals. The data shows that we have saved thousands of hours of police man time and woman time, and we have more effectively connected people in crisis to unhoused services, addiction services, mental health services. But in order to innovate, we had to have the courage to think about things differently. And I'm so proud that I'm part of a city that leads and lives those values.
Thank you, Mayor Pureval. Who would like to go next? How are you addressing crime in your community, and how do you plan to ensure trust between community and law enforcement?
Well, I just want to build on Mayor Pureval's point. I believe that addressing public safety and addressing violent crime in our respective cities, it is a group project. We as mayors can't do it alone. And I also want to challenge the press a little bit, because there's this misnomer that in our respective cities, crime is up. Over the last several years, the mayors on this stage, we've worked together to reduce violent crime in our respective cities. And for me, this is a very personal issue. Number one, my dad was a cop, and I worried every night whether or not he would come home safe. But also, I've lost many family members and kids I grew up with to violent crime on our streets. And so when I took office, we negotiated the largest modern pay increase in history, a 25% pay increase for the men and women of our department. We've also streamlined how we think about recruitment, more signing bonuses. If you're a veteran or have a college degree, we're gonna fast track you and be promoted in our department. But the other thing that's important, and Mayor Pureval talked about this with our crime gun intelligence centers, we are using data and technology in a different way. Right now, Cleveland's homicide solve rate is over 70%. Wow. Over 70%. Nearly 20 percentage points higher than the national average. You wanna know why? Because we're using NIBIN technology, ShotSpotter, more camera, license plate readers. All those things gives us the data we need to reduce crime on our streets. Here's what I'll say as well. The police can't solve this problem by themselves, right? And so one of the biggest challenges that we have in our respective cities is that we don't have a dedicated source of funding to invest in solving the root causes of violent crime on our city. So we took $10 million of funding from the American Rescue Plan. We parked it at the Cleveland Foundation. Now we have a 20-year endowment fund that's only investing in out-of-school time programming for youth, more violence interrupters, chess programs to give young men confidence in school. All those things have led to Cleveland seeing a nearly 30% reduction in homicides, a 12% reduction in shootings, over 20% reduction in carjackings. That's progress. That's progress. And so data's one thing, I get it, but we have to make sure we push back on this narrative, but also recognize that we all have a moral responsibility as well to be a part of the solution. That includes the press.
Mayor Ginther?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what has already been shared here. We're continuing to lead the nation amongst big cities in decrease in homicides, over 37% decrease in homicides and violent crime in this community from last year to this year. But I understand. I mean, when you take a look at the last several years and the trends, there was an uptick in violence, particularly amongst young people. But it's important for us to share good data, to share information, and tell our stories. One of the reasons we've been able to see this dramatic reduction is we've embraced a comprehensive approach to public and neighborhood safety. So prevention, intervention, and enforcement. We have an all-of-the-above strategy. We're making historic investments into more police officers and more police classes than we ever have before, but we also created the Office of Violence Prevention that really helps to make sure that we're investing in programs that are making a difference with our intervention efforts. And because of the rescue plan, we've been able to make historic investments into youth programming services, not just during the summer and after school, but during the entire school year. And we think all of those things have helped contributed. The biggest drop, we haven't seen this levels of violence since 2016. And so we are think we're on the right track. We got a lot of work to do, as all these mayors have said, but it's critically important that we continue to share facts and information so that folks can understand where we are, but more importantly, where we're headed. Because we need everybody to be involved in this. I need the faith community, I need the business community. The police, as Mayor Bibb said, cannot solve this issue of violence, particularly youth violence, on their own. We all need to be involved in this and own it.
Okay. Speaking of our youth, let's talk about schools, city schools. In the 2023 Ohio School Report Cards, out of 5 stars, Columbus City Schools received 2, Cincinnati 2, Cleveland 2.5. A city without a good educational system won't thrive or even survive. So what are the greatest challenges to your school systems, teachers, and students, and how are you working to strengthen educational outcomes in your city?
Yeah, I would say this is probably one of the hardest issues we have to tackle as we emerge out of the pandemic. You know, I'm very fortunate because I'm one of the only mayors in the state of Ohio that has mayoral control of our school system. And it's an issue that I don't take lightly because I know how important having a high quality education was for me to give me a quality shot at life. What we have seen in Cleveland is this. First and foremost, we saw a lot of great progress in our district leading up to the pandemic. A double-digit increase in high school graduation rates, increases in college completion and college attainment. But the pandemic slowed a lot of that progress. And the biggest thing that we've seen during the pandemic and as we've come out of the pandemic is that the value proposition of education has completely changed. I've had high school students during the pandemic and even now drop out of high school to get higher paying jobs at Amazon or Target because they're really focused on putting money on their table and making sure that mom and dad and auntie and grandma have a good quality home and something to eat at night. And so one thing we're trying to do as we come out of the pandemic is really enhance the value proposition of high quality schools, particularly high quality public education in our city. You know, we have a program called the Say Yes to Scholarship program, where it's a guaranteed scholarship for any kid in Cleveland who graduates from a CMSD high school to go to a community college or four-year institution. But we have to make sure that we give them the confidence and faith that that choice is worth it. I believe that every child should have a pathway when they leave high school, whether you're going to the armed forces to join our military, you're going to a four-year college or a community college, or you're gonna start a business or come work for me at City Hall, right? But the key is exposing young people early enough. We can't do it in their junior year of high school. We gotta do it in middle school, or maybe even earlier than that, because there is so much competition for our children's attention right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Mayor Ginther. When you're mayor, nothing is not your fault, even if it's not your responsibility, right? And so, as Mayor Bibb mentioned, most mayors in the state of Ohio, at least, do not have mayoral control over their schools. Now, that is not me passing the buck, but just a factual statement. Nevertheless, two stars or not, we have significant challenges with our Cincinnati public schools. From a governance perspective, we have challenges because we have been churning through superintendents for various reasons, and that lack of leadership at the top, or steady leadership, not lack of leadership, but that lack of consistent leadership at the top and even in the administrators within our schools, particularly the schools that are most challenged, is part of those obstacles. The way that the state of Ohio funds our public schools, particularly in our cities and urban areas, is a systemic challenge. Cincinnati Public Schools, I think last I saw, had a $100 million operating deficit, had made some hard choices, knocked that down to about $30 million, but year over year, they're facing a $30 million deficit. In addition to that, the schools are providing services to kids that are challenged at home without that familial at times or social community support, which is challenging and shows up in truancy rates that are unacceptable, and shows up in mental health crises that to persist. You know, when there is so much poverty, disinvestment, and at times violence, the residual traumatic impact of that cannot be overstated. And we see that showing up in our kids and the results that they are providing in schools. And so the way I think about this, how I can help from a city's perspective is, number one, do everything I can to grow my city. Because the increase in population, the increase in development, increases property tax revenue that goes to our schools to support our educators, to support our staff, and to support our children. Number two, continuing to prioritize public safety, particularly in and around our school zones. And that includes making sure that we are partnering with community leaders like the Urban League, like county departments, to provide after-school programming so we can keep kids at school for as long as possible. And number three, it includes something that Cincinnati is leading on, which is making sure that as many schools as possible are not just schools, but are civic pillars where you can get access to health care. Many of our schools have dental offices, have primary care offices, have libraries that are open to the public so that not just the kids are receiving those services, but the entire community is. But ultimately, what we need fundamentally is a different systemic way to fund our schools and support our schools. And we need, frankly, more support from other organizations at the county, like JFS, like other intergovernmental agencies, to work more collaboratively to catch these students as they fall. You know, oftentimes when you look at the teens involved in violent crime, they are also the teens that are involved in the JFS system that come from broken homes or sexual violence or other unspeakable crimes that these kids are experiencing. And of course that leads to lower test scores. But the nexus of all of these social ills are all falling on the shoulders of our children. And I'm certainly committed to doing everything I can to not just focus on their educational results, but focus on them as an entire human being and their needs, whether it's career opportunities, safety, health outcomes, to move the ball on all of those equitable social determinants of health, then we will, of course, see a direct relationship to higher test scores.
I would add is I really view my job as mayor is to be partner in chief to the superintendent. So we don't have any control over the schools. They're all independently elected school board members that hire the superintendent, the treasurer, and the internal auditor. The three places I've really focused is kindergarten readiness, making sure more young people enter kindergarten ready to learn and future ready. Columbus has been a big part of that. Historic investments we've made into preschool to increase kindergarten readiness. The district, the superintendent also asked, particularly coming back into the classroom after COVID, some real issues with middle schoolers. And she said, we need you to focus on funding after-school programming for middle schoolers in these areas. And so we put that in place with a number of neighborhood and community partners. The other thing that we've done in partnership with the private sector and the leadership of our council president, Shannon Hardin, is created the Columbus Promise program. So kindergarten readiness after school, but is happening in Cleveland. Every Columbus City School graduate has the ability and get an associate's degree or a certificate from Columbus State Community College. It has been a game changer. When FAFSA completion and college enrollment was going down around the nation in the last few years, record numbers of CCS graduates were enrolling at Columbus State and are getting the tools they need to take advantage of all the incredible job opportunities that are here and that will continue to come here in the years ahead. So that's really our, where can we support Dr. Chapman? We have a great superintendent. We have a dynamic superintendent. She's got probably the toughest job in this community. And I'm going to stand with her and work with her to continue to improve the quality of education for young people in this city, because you're absolutely right. The future depends on it.
Mayor Ginther reminded me of something else that I would be remiss not to brag about. One of our former council member, now Congressman Greg Landsman, worked several years ago with a public-private partnership in order to pass, speaking of kindergarten readiness, in order to pass from City Hall a tax increase to make sure that we had universal pre-K throughout our community. We've passed that. It's been in place for several years now. And then most recently, we have tried to add on to that by passing baby bonds. So now all kids coming through Preschool Promise will have access to a savings account in their name endowed by the city. Because data shows that 60% of kids who have access to some kind of savings account go on to a 2-year or 4-year advanced degree. So again, we are trying to wrap our arms around our superintendent and our school as well and support in various ways to make their job easier.
All right, and I want to commend the city governments for making higher education accessible for all students, all of our city students. I think that's very important, and that was one of the big strides that I'm proud of in our city, Mayor Ginther, and you're doing the same as well, and so that's great. Let's talk about, Mayor Pureval kind of tiptoed into politics a little bit, so let's kind of go there. Obviously,
let's
an
go.
election year. Yeah, obviously.
Nosedive.
We are in an election year. Ohio's junior senator, Senator J.D. Vance, will be on the November ballot as Donald Trump's running mate. If Trump wins this election, how will having a vice president from Ohio impact the political landscape in your cities?
Oh, good.
Or will it at all?
I mean, I guess I should go since he's technically a city resident.
This is true.
By the way, Vivek Ramaswamy is also from my area.
Wait, I thought he was from Upper Arlington. He's from our area. Is he?
You can have
Or maybe
him
he
if
has
you want.
two
I
homes.
mean, you can,
Maybe he has two homes. Doesn't he live in Upper Arlington?
he went to high school in Cincinnati.
Oh, okay, high school.
Look, I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. I think just speaking entirely objectively, nonpartisan, Senator Vance has not had enough time to provide a track record. So it's hard to predict how that will impact our city governance. I will commend him on his fast action and bipartisan work with Senator Brown on the East Palestine catastrophe, both environmental and human catastrophe. But I think it remains to be seen what that will actually look like. What is very clear, however, is they have made it abundantly clear, the Trump campaign, that the Inflation Reduction Act, the most profound bipartisan legislation to empower cities to combat climate change, will be off the table. We will see those cuts. I hope not, but Cincinnati received the single largest federal grant in our country's history, $1.6 billion, to finally, at long last, fix our Brent Spence Bridge. 3% of the nation's GDP goes over that bridge, connecting Kentucky and Ohio through Cincinnati. I hope that money is still there. I hope we're able to actually put shovels in the ground and fix that. I hope there's no impact to the CHIPS Act, which is Mayor Ginther is so proud of, and rightfully so, paved the way for Intel's massive investment to transform not just the state of Ohio and central Ohio's economy, but even our economy, the residual impacts of that. And so, I can't say any of this for certain other than the IRA, because they've made that very clear. But I think there is a risk that all of this momentum, all of these federal resources that we now have directly from the federal government, not having to go through the state, I think that would be at risk. And that would be a profound blow to our economic development strategies in Southwest Ohio.
I would just say, over the last 3 years since I've had the honor to be mayor of my hometown, I've seen firsthand how important it is, regardless if it's a Democrat in the White House or a Republican in the White House, that we have an administration who believes in investing in America's cities. But for the American Rescue Plan, all of our cities on this stage would have been in complete worse shape. We would have had to lay off hundreds of cops, hundreds of firefighters, hundreds of folks who work in public works. The fact that we've been able to make big down payments to address structural issues like closing the digital divide, eradicating lead paint in our homes, that's because we had somebody in the White House who understood that we needed to make a big, bold investment in America's cities. Big cities, medium-sized cities, and small cities as well, too. And so it's important that we have an administration in the White House that really believes that America's mayors deserve a seat at the table. And as I often say, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you believe in Cleveland, I'm going to find a way to work with you, because I don't have the luxury of not getting more than my fair share of resources, given the challenges that we're trying to tackle in Cleveland every single day.
Ohio has a great history of U.S. senators. You think back throughout the years, and a couple pop to mind right away: Voinovich, Glenn, Betzenbaum, Portman, Brown. Men from all different parts of our state, different political persuasions, who always put Ohio first and made sure that Ohio was well represented and supported in Washington. My hope and belief is that Senator Vance has the opportunity to join that echelon at some point in his U.S. Senate career.
That's some OG. That's an OG tactic right there. That is.
Yeah, it's an OG comment. All right. Thank you, Mayor Ginther.
One of those great Ohio senators was a former Cleveland mayor, by the way.
Oh, fancy. All right. With the growing concerns about affordable housing, that's an issue for a lot of cities pretty much throughout the U.S. How do you intend to balance development and gentrification to protect vulnerable populations in your city?
Ginther, let's let you go first. I mean, I'm happy.
They all know that this is my number one issue here in Columbus, and since becoming the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we've decided that housing is going to be the number one issue, and we're proposing to both nominees a Marshall Plan, a transformational investment in housing. We're 200,000 units short in our region right now, and I know that number across the country is far more staggering. We need to disrupt in a significant way and need the federal government to invest in housing the way they have in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We want that money coming directly to cities, because if you want things to get done, you give them to mayors. You don't assign them to state legislators or other, federal legislators. We know how to get things done, and we know how to form the public-private partnerships to help us get in place what we need. We're in the midst of setting up a regional housing collaborative here in Central Ohio. It will be not just with Columbus and Franklin County, but the entire region. As you all have heard me in this forum before talk about the Link Us transit issue that will be on the ballot this fall. On Monday, City Council will vote to update the zoning code in our city for the first time in 70 years. Are critically important, but we believe the federal government has a role to play in housing. We believe housing is infrastructure, and we spent the morning with representatives of our business communities here in Columbus talking about how could we as cities, the 3 C's, in a 3C partnership with our business communities and other interested parties, continue to push for growing our population, continuing to invest in housing, in transit, in placemaking in our cities. How do we re-envision our downtowns? How do we use our collective power of the mayors of the 3 largest cities in our state and business community, make that case so that the state and federal government step up and meet us to make sure that we can build more homes? We have a supply crisis here in Columbus. Other parts of the state may have a different challenge. But right now, we got more people than homes. We haven't built enough homes since before the Great Recession. That issue's just compounded. And we're going to grow by a third more. And that's why we need to make this our number one issue to focus on, I think, as a state and as a nation, if we want to be competitive and own the future.
I completely agree. And before I get into my answer, it is a big deal. I'm not going to curse, but it is a big deal that Mayor Ginther is the president of the U.S. Conference. Because not only, yeah, please. You're having a ceremony tomorrow, is that right? I'll be back tomorrow. But it's a big deal because not only is he able to lead Columbus, but he's able to influence national policy for other cities, but also, maybe most importantly, at the White House and in Congress. And particularly with the acknowledgement now at the federal level that there has not been this comprehensive effort around housing development. And you only need to look at President Biden's most recent State of the Union, where he actually talked about housing, which is usually considered a local issue. It has now caught the attention of the federal folks, because if public safety is our number one issue in Cincinnati, number 2 is housing. And of course, affordable, capital A affordable, 30 to 60% AMI, but folks, we need housing at all income levels. Your question is fundamentally about displacement. Right now, with the status quo, we are displacing people. A recent study from the Inquirer showed that particularly black and brown residents can no longer afford, disproportionately black and brown residents can no longer afford to live in the urban core. And they're being pushed further and further outside of the city. So that is happening now. So of course, when you bring in investment into a disinvested community, the market will change. It will not just change for that building or that block, it will affect housing prices across the board. Which is why we're doing everything we can, exactly the strategy that Mayor Ginther rolled out, to make it easier to build housing, to legalize housing at all income levels. I am so passionate about zoning because just this past year, we also passed the most significant comprehensive zoning reform that Cincinnati has done since the 70s. And the amount of vitriol and pushback was astonishing, because this issue isn't really partisan. It's not even racially charged. It is about single-family homeowners at all income levels who do not want renters in their community. And so if you built a city in the 70s to try to fight against the white flight, quote unquote, and wanted to create suburbs within your urban core, completely changing the identity of your city, maybe that was successful. But in my city, until we passed this reform, a majority of our neighborhoods were single-family exclusive, which means that in a majority of Cincinnati neighborhoods until very recently, we were telling people, you cannot live in this neighborhood unless you can afford the single most expensive type of housing, single-family housing. And this is generational. You know, I'm Asian, I respect my elders, I love my elders, but, you know, 40 years ago, housing prices were on average like $20,000. And it was nowhere near the percentage of your income going towards housing. Now it is completely different. In my city, it's $250,000 to own a home. And so generations of that kind of design of our city planning and zoning have left a city that is incredibly segregated and incredible concentrations of poverty. And I am not okay with that. And so if this massive zoning plan that we just passed upset a lot of people, if it results in my not getting reelected, that's fine. Because in 50 years from now, because we have changed the way we design our city, we always talk about systemic racism, because we have changed it at the systems level and paired it with public transit investment, rolling out bus rapid transit, we will look like a completely different city that is more integrated, more affordable, and more vibrant. And that is the vision for Cincinnati, for Columbus, and for Cleveland. We have to do everything we can to get more gap financing in. We have to do everything we can to crack down on institutional, predatory landlords who are coming in, buying up huge swaths of single-family housing. All of that is true. But what we really need is federal action to fund these strategies. On the supply side, we need more housing, and we need more money to create that housing. And if we put together that strategy, then we will be able to grow and build housing and protect legacy communities while also inviting new Cincinnatians and people across the state.
I want to just build on what Mayor Ginther and Mayor Pureval said. Both were spot on. I'm jealous of Mayor Ginther's problem. I want to have a growth problem in Cleveland because our city has not grown for a long damn time, and I want to change that. But we have to grow in a way that allows for all of our residents to get their aspect of equity, inclusion, opportunity, and hope. And one of the biggest barriers, as Mayor Pureval mentioned, is this culture of NIMBYism. Well, they're not like us, so I don't want to be a part of this change. You know, love Kendrick Lamar, but still, we need everybody to be a part of the fabric of our communities. That's what makes the great American experiment so amazing. And one of the biggest issues that we're seeing in Cleveland is since the Great Recession of 2008, we've seen these out-of-state, racist, predatory landlords come in, particularly in black neighborhoods in Cleveland, buy up the real estate, put lipstick on a pig and say it's a great house, but the roof is still collapsing, and there's no enforcement because we didn't have the tools to enforce the law. We just worked with City Council to pass our Residents First legislation, the most aggressive housing code enforcement the city has ever seen. Now, if you buy land in Cleveland, whether you're in Sweden or in Shaker Heights, you need to have a local agent in charge that I can hold in a criminal court of law because I'm not going to allow that behavior happen on my streets.
All right. All right, we're going to move on to the audience questions. That is a CMC's long-standing tradition to take audience questions. So we're going to move to that. Questions from our live stream and questions for in-person audiences, our audience here in just a few minutes. So if you have a question for our mayors up here, please work your way back to Doug Buchanan. He's going to handle that. And if you're watching online, just type in your questions into the chat. And while people move there, I'm going to take a quick few seconds here to put something in your ears that I'm an advocate for the disability community. And one thing that I've talked to Columbus City Council about is we need more adult changing stations in public restrooms. So that's something I want to put in your ears right now for all the mayors of these cities, because public restrooms, family-friendly locations, malls, fairs, things like that, rest stops. Think about that, because our disability community has a tough time, and everyone should be able to take care of that basic need in a dignified way. Take it away, Doug.
Yolanda, thank you very much, Yolanda, and thank you to the mayors for joining us today. If you do have a question for us, please come on up here to the microphone. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We have about 15 minutes left, so we'll try to move very quickly through these questions. Ground rules for great questions at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. They take less than 30 seconds to ask. And what punctuation mark do they end in? A question mark. Yes, thank you, everyone. From the live stream audience, Bevan Schenk asks, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce released a study yesterday expressing concerns with local taxation. Can the mayors briefly discuss the importance of municipal income taxes to their communities?
It's the lifeblood of our cities. I think in Cincinnati, so we have two different big budgets. We have the general fund, which pays for the salaries, and then we have the capital fund, which pays for all the infrastructure. The general fund is, I think, 80% funded by earnings tax revenue. It is the single largest funder of Cincinnati and likely all the Ohio cities. And so the impact of remote work, where folks who used to work downtown and live in the suburbs but are now working from the suburbs and paying those local earnings tax rates, which are oftentimes lower than municipalities because they don't have to pay for a large police force, et cetera. That is it's an existential threat to cities long term in Ohio. In response to that, I'm so grateful to have incredible corporate partners in Cincinnati. So partly in response to that, when I came in, one of the first things I did was partner with Brendan Cole, who's the CEO of our chamber in the room, John Moeller, the CEO of Procter & Gamble, Katie Blackburn, the president of the Bengals, and Tim Spence, the CEO of Fifth Third, to convene a group of business leaders, labor leaders, and human services leaders to do a deep dive in our budget and think through how can we change or look at revenue and expenditures, but also maybe critically more important, what does the next generation of Cincinnati's local economy look like? Because we are in a just transition period. We're living through history. That's not rhetoric, that is true. The transformational changes of how people are living and working and playing are here to stay. And the cities that are innovative and flexible and nimble and are making big decisions right now in order to predict where that's going are the ones that are going to be really, really in a solid position. And look, there's a reason to believe that Ohio will lead that charge, because climate change is another one of those macro, huge issues that is going to continue to change the way people are living and working. And I'm fond of bragging about Intel. I'm sorry, Mayor Ginther, but one of the two of the reasons Intel chose Central Ohio was, number one, our access to fresh water, and number two, our climate resiliency. I am convinced that there will continue to be an inward migration into the middle of the country from the coast as cost of living goes up, as access to fresh groundwater becomes more challenging, as we continue to see these natural climate-induced disasters. And with Cleveland and the Great Lakes and Cincinnati and the Ohio River, there's a reason to believe that we should be those destinations for climate migrants. And again, it's not just rhetoric. Companies are making investment decisions based on those two factors, and that is right in our wheelhouse.
Spot on.
I would remind folks that of 80%, so when I joined council 100 years ago, about 63% of our general fund came from income tax. It's now all of us are at 80%. Part of that is because the state tax policy changes and the gutting of the local government fund is what it is. Those things have happened, we've moved on. What's critically important, though, is that over 60% of our general fund budgets are dedicated to police and fire. That is where cities spend the overwhelming majority of their resources. And of those 60% of our general fund budgets, probably 85, 86% is people. It is the cops and firefighters serving and protecting our neighborhoods. And so we are fully open to having conversations about the future, how we can remain competitive, but we have to be able to fund basic city services, particularly police and fire, when having those types of conversations. But cities have had to figure it out the hard way as the state has moved further and further away from funding basic city services, and we got to protect that.
Hi there. Can you all hear me? Angela Lopez. I work for PSI. It's an IT staffing firm here in Columbus, Ohio. Yay. So technology related, you guys mentioned earlier about crime and technology regarding that. I'm just going to leave this open for technology sector in general. What do you guys see as the biggest opportunities for both our technology workforce as well as technology sector development in Ohio, outside of Intel?
Well, I can speak internally. So I'm the city's first millennial mayor. And when I ran for mayor, I ran on a platform of modernizing our city government and modernizing City Hall. It was so bad that when I got sworn in, it took me 2 days to get my email account set up. Here's the other kicker. A majority of our employees did not have access to Microsoft 365, right? So in just 3 years, we've modernized internally how we think about employee communications. We finally have DocuSign. We're going to launch our brand new 311 call center later this summer. And we built the first new city website in nearly 2 decades. And so Cleveland has a unique opportunity to really be a leader now as a smarter, more resilient city. We have some great technology companies in Cleveland and across Northeast Ohio. And I think as mayors, we can be a conduit and a champion for that kind of broad-scale change around the technology sector. But we have to make sure that we're a good example internally at our respective city halls as well, too.
Yeah, I think, look, there's the mayor answer that I'm happy to give you about, about the innovation district that Jobs Ohio invested, I think, $100 million in, which is a collaboration between Children's Hospital, by the way, the #1 children's hospital in the country, the University of Cincinnati, and yeah, not humble, not humble. When you're #1, you don't have to be humble. We can talk about, Procter & Gamble, Kroger investing into Cincy Tech and Centrifuge, which is our tech ecosystem hubs. And all of that is true. We just had Black Tech Week, which is the premier national convention of Black founders and Black owners. It's not in Miami, it's not in San Francisco, it's in Cincinnati, Ohio. And all of that is intentional and all of that is real. But the real answer is artificial intelligence. I think we are just now understanding, maybe even not just now understanding, the profound impact that AI is going to have on the way that we work, the way that we interact with each other. It's already starting to be rolled out in its infancy in our mobile phones and our laptops. You now see AI generative responses on your Google searches. This is just the beginning. I don't necessarily have an answer for where AI is going to lead. One of the things that I'm concerned about is facial recognition technology. Given how much surveillance there is in my city, what is a responsible way for CPD to have that kind of power? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so, what I'm thinking through right now is, again, similar to our earnings tax income commission, putting together some smart people, some CTOs from P&G, Kroger, et cetera, and just trying to think through how is the private sector adapting to this, what do they see long term, and what are those applications for public sector as well, because this could be incredibly disruptive to our 6,000 city employees, for one. How many of these jobs are going to go away because of AI?
The only thing I would add is We think this is another great opportunity in place for the 3C partnership. I mean, we have the disproportionate amount of data scientists and technologists, in our regions, and be able to come together with our business communities and other partners to leverage. We think we can do an incredible job leading in this space in the years ahead, and a great place for us to contribute to the state's economy.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes left, so we'll try to get to at least 2 more questions.
I'm Margaret De Laurentiis. I work at Star House, a drop-in center for homeless youth here in Columbus. I need to do a shout out to Mayor Ginther for all your support at Star House. My question is about mass transit and about the growth of more public transportation for people that need it. And I also have a question about the 3C train and any information we have about its progress.
I'll let them talk about 3C train. I think there is progress there. We're all really excited about it. I'll just touch on public transit. Prior to my administration, the previous mayor rallied support from the business community to actually increase our sales tax in order to transform our public transportation. We are on the precipice of rolling out bus rapid transit, which is going to be a game changer for Cincinnati. And we paired our zoning reforms to be consistent with where those BRT routes are going to go, because a potential here is to put BRT physical stops in disinvested neighborhood business districts, thereby organically increasing investment in those areas. Coupled with those zoning changes will create hopefully more businesses and more housing in those areas as well. We're Western cities, we're kind of obviously committed to our cars, but there's no doubt that the future and younger generations want more access to transit, multimodal, but also micromodal transportations, and we're trying to make those investments right now.
The cities that will win in the future are the cities that are going to prioritize multimodal transit. Cleveland really led the way in the state with one of the first BRT systems with our Health Line, anchored by the best hospital in the world, the Cleveland Clinic. But beyond that, we're incentivizing more transit-oriented development in our city. We just passed legislation to end parking minimums in high-frequency transit corridors. We are laying more bike lanes down all across our city because we want to make sure, regardless if you're a senior citizen or a new millennial entrepreneur, you have multiple ways to access every part of our city. In terms of the new Amtrak investment, all the mayors on this stage here this afternoon have been advocating with Secretary Buttigieg to make sure Amtrak can better connect Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. I can't wait to go down to Cincinnati to see the Browns beat the Bengals on a train. And I think there is a huge amount of federal support for that new investment. I had to do it, brother.
He knows that I'm now, after the jabroni incident, that I'm now not allowed to talk about this. So he's punching down right now.
The only time you get silence out of Puraval, right? Exactly. He's disciplined. He's disciplined. Let's tackle that last question.
Nowhere near that topic for now. Totally away from it. Margie Pizzuti, retired CEO of Goodwill. Shout out to Yolanda for your comment about providing individuals with disabilities with access in public restrooms to the things that they need as they move towards an integrated part of this community. My question for the three of you goes back to public education. And you mentioned a lot of opportunities, particularly for public education, particularly in the cities. You didn't really mention much about technical education, a pathway for those individuals to get stackable credentials, to get into positions with little or no cost with support. And I wondered if each of you could maybe briefly talk about that as a part of your strategy in public education, particularly in the cities.
Yeah, real quick. This is a major opportunity to create real wealth in our city, especially in Black and brown neighborhoods, especially as we see the green energy economy emerge. Our administration deployed $10 million of funding to train people of color to lay fiber and broadband, to weatherize homes, and put solar panels on homes as well too. That's the future. And as we work to rewire America, we don't have enough electricians for this transformation. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is. We need more support from the state and federal government, but I think America's mayors can lead the way on this topic.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, are you about to cut me off? I'm sorry. Okay, I'll just say I completely agree. We are following a strategy of advanced manufacturing, hoping to get some of the momentum from the Intel investment, really good jobs with low credential requirements that have good benefits. We're also investing into Groundwork Ohio, which, similar to what Mayor Bibb was talking about, connects students with green jobs of the future, not just seasonal jobs, but careers in order to put them on that path. So workforce development in all of its forms is absolutely a priority for us, not just four-year institutions, but also trying to diversify our apprenticeship programs through our organized labor unions, and obviously all the IT jobs that are hopefully coming this way.
Ginther, you got anything?
Great announcement just yesterday. First Church of God, Bishop Clark and President David Harrison announced a game changer on the southeast side. Bishop Clark always reminds us that the First Church of God is only 17 miles from the Intel site, and it's going to be a game changer doing exactly what you're describing. Grateful for those types of partnerships and leadership from the faith community, the community colleges, and corporate Columbus.
All right, thank you very much. Doug's giving me the evil eye. I got to wrap it up. Thank you for your questions. I'm going to turn the podium over to Joelle.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I hope all of you found today's program thought-provoking and optimistic about the future of Ohio's cities. Thank you to today's sponsors, Bricker Graydon, the Columbus Region, the Ohio Mayor's Alliance, and Spectrum. Thank you also to the Ellis for hosting us, and the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And our very special appreciation to today's speakers, Mayors Bibb, Ginther, Purval, and our host, Yolanda Harris. Please make plans to join us here next week for the next forum, the Columbus Brand, right here at the Ellis. Thank you again for joining us today. We could not have done this without you.